right. All right, all right, all right. A.N.THROPOS here with another exciting episode of You Don't Know. You don't know, huh? So don't act like you do. Because then something bad might happen to you. And I'm talking to you. Oh!
In other words, they have a system that they've internalized. Nothing that they do works inside of a real system. You can't, like you said, turn a screw, build a machine, do the practical things that we do that engineers and chemists do. All of that stuff works. It's a known system. The theoretical system or models that they have used to dazzle us, it's basically number magic.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, it's sigil magic. And they have created this arcane system, and they've used spells to build space around us and to create this system that is mystical. This is why I say that, on that level, science is a religion, and we believe what they tell us, and then they tell us a story, and we have NASA, which is... I've defined NASA as largely being, first off, an intelligence agency operation. Secondly, it is a pseudoscientific operation. And thirdly, it is probably one of the largest mass media distribution platforms on the earth.
Yes. And it was created by my great uncle.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. By the way.
Right.
Yeah.
No need to thank me. Yeah, it's a quagmire, and it's like you said, chemistry and all this stuff. This is something that has to work. They got to be able to make gasoline. They got to be able to do combustion and all this stuff. And even if there is a lot of stuff that's left out of physics and chemistry, in other words, if that it's all like exothermic, or whatever, making explosions instead of implosions or whatever. There's still, some science to it, but then you get off into the other quote unquote sciences, especially archaeology and anthropology, where it's just alive from beginning to finish. It's just, unless you go to Brigham Young University, where I think they teach more of the truth, and I'm not a Mormon, but apparently they've got a little bit of a different system there.
Yeah. Well, your mystical systems are actually closer to the real science than the hard science that they're teaching at someplace like Carnegie Mellon.
Oh, yeah, you bet.
Again, people have said to me when I called bullshit on the moon landing, and they said, well, how would you even get away with that? Look at NASA. Look at all the people involved with this. There are engineers and scientists and support technicians and telemetry and all of the ground support and the military. And I'm going, listen, everything's on levels. Everybody's on a need-to-know basis. Your job is done in a compartment. That's how government works. I know what it looks like from the inside. I know what it looks like in dealing with it in my adult life and business. And I understand that people have concepts about the jobs they perform that appears to be important and appears to be contributing to something, when in fact most of them are docile paper pushers or backroom technicians. How you contain something like this is, again, part of the magic. It's part of the spell. Because everybody's plugged into the same circuit board.
And there's only a small percentage of the humanity that will question these things. People like you and me, and we are just a tiny percentage of the the human organism is a very social animal, and they just want, they're going to stick together with what everybody else believes, or you're crazy or you're stupid, when that's not true. And
it's consensus reality.
It really is
consensus reality.
It really is. And I've even sometimes in my mind take it so far as to think that there's actually some type of programming. It's not within the people have programming that allows them to think in certain areas and not think in other areas.
It's compartmentalized. It's very entrained.
There's almost a matrix-like aspect to it.
I mean, we all have it. We all have that aspect of us. It's part It's part of the way the human brain functions on one level. And the human brain, the way it is entrained within the Western system. Dominant left brain function, logic, reason. Hold on a sec. Clearing the nostrils. Our prefrontal cortex and the entrainment of the eyes to a frontal position are all ways that they constrain the mind. When you break that, when you begin to move between the hemispheres, and this was, if you just look at the people that they scouted for programs and the kind of abilities that they wanted, all of those abilities were the exact opposite of what they want the general public to have. So you have to actually start to think sideways. You have to learn how to do lateral thinking and not vertical thinking. You have to become nonlinear. You have to learn to use your eyes in a very different way. You have to learn to think in ways that some people might. The way I conceptualize things a lot of times, even in my work life, which entails a fair amount of technology and material sciences, that I don't think the way other people think. Hence, I tend to be a problem solver because I stand back and I look at something from a holistic standpoint. I'm not looking at the system. I'm standing outside of the system and then looking at the process. And so our ability to function is constrained within this matrix mindset in such a way that it's actually very easy to control people for the most part. I mean, recent history for most people walking around right now in an adult is 9/11 and how they pulled that off and the programming that went on with that. But you can go back as far as, even before our lifetimes, certainly the times of your great uncle, when they began to formulate the NSA, when they began to put together the CIA, when they orchestrated the clever ruse that gave us World War II, when they did the Gulf of Tonkin that gave us Vietnam, when they have run any endless number of these scenarios, and because they have a media platform that can visualize, verbally enunciate, and speak the spells into the minds of millions of people via mass media, we have what is basically a matrix screen around us that tells us what our reality is.
Absolutely. And all of those examples you gave are the prime, the main examples that we have, that we have until maybe, I don't know how long ago it was, and I don't know the truth of this, but if there is any truth to this Tartarian empire, it blows the doors wide open. It is unbelievable. If there's any truth to that, if they were able to pull that off, and all indications point to that there is something there. There is something there with that Tartarian deal.
This is, it's very interesting because the whole Tartaria thing actually came out of something that on the surface seemed rather zany, and that was the Flat Earth movement.
They're all in on it. That seems for sure.
And I understand that the Flat Earth has just become, it's just one of those things where it's cringeworthy now. But when I first started seeing the Flat Earth material circulating, one of my abductees contacted me, and she said, and this is a very smart woman. This is a woman who, for a number of years, I had a lot of very deep contact with. She was a project kid. She was an abductee. She was also very highly educated as a medical practitioner and a computer scientist. And she started talking to me about the Flat Earth, and I said, this is, I can't quite go there, but I kind of get where you're going. And then I looked at it and I realized that Flat Earth is an exercise. The Flat Earth thing did two things. It fractured a lot of people. It created wide divisions within the alternative communities because there were people who their visceral reaction to that was just to snap out. And I get that. I'm not attached to a ball Earth model. I never have been. I wasn't attached to the space model either, and I haven't been attached to that since I was 17 years old. But I thought flat Earth was interesting on one level, and it was a thought exercise to take us out of thinking about things in a very rigid way.
It really
So
was.
what's interesting is that Tartaria kind of came out of this whole thing, and all of a sudden there's these researchers and they're going, look at this. This doesn't make any sense. Look at these maps. I mean, we've got maps that are maybe 400 years old. The continents look nothing like they look like now. The oceans don't look the same. There's inland oceans. There's bays where there shouldn't be bays. There's empires where we were told there was nothing but woodlands and mountains. And then there's technology, because you start looking at these buildings and the design of them, and you're going, crap, this was before Tesla, and it looks like they probably had free energy. And it's like, what happened to them? And so now we have an entirely different level of thought exercise that challenges the historical anthropological tableau that we've been given. All of a sudden, we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy, at all.
That's right. And, another thing that it's always kind of bothered me, but I never realized that it bothered me, is looking at these very old photographs throughout my entire life of these, Moscow or any of these big cities, and they'll show, or even at the bank at Wells Fargo, they'll show stuff a long time ago, and there'll be this huge city, and there's like 2 or 3 people. Just 2 or 3 people. And then, but you see 50 years later, it's like just all people everywhere, and then, but a lot of these old pictures, there's just nobody there. And there's also a lot of other disturbing stuff, like, there's photographic evidence that there for sure was some type of Atlantean-like city that we now call San Francisco, that was largely demolished. And I mean, it was there, and even after the people started populating it, and it was not built for the World's Fair in 1915. It was there already.
Yeah. Yeah, we seem to see this pattern of these world expos that they had. I mean, what the hell? Has anybody ever explained to us what the Eiffel Tower was built for exactly? It's a hell of a big radio tower.
Yeah, that's obvious, yeah.
You don't need a tower that big. You can only bounce radio waves so far unless you're doing shortwave.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's a hell of a tower. What was it there for? What were these turrets and these towers and these needles? And I mean, we've got one. I was in the state capitol here last weekend walking around and took a picture of a building that's been in the skyscape of the city for as long as I've lived here, and I never looked at it. And when I looked at it, I went, that didn't look right. All of a sudden, you're starting to look at things differently. Like what sits on the top of a building, it's ornate. It's got all of this detail to it. It's got these gigantic needles going up, or it has a place where there was one because they took a bunch of them down. And all of a sudden, this interesting thought exercise of Flat Earth has spun off these interesting abilities to begin to observe. Why? Because now we're thinking laterally. Humanity is waking up. I mean, I find this really encouraging.
Yes, I do too. And there's a lot of ideas why that might be happening. Having to do with like the Gaia or the Sophia narrative. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know anything about John Lamb Lash or these Gnostics. And that can be kind of a quagmire to start discussing, because there's no such thing as a Christian Gnostic for one. Well, even though there's lots of people who might claim that they are that, and then there's the fake Gnostics, which will, when people think of the Gnostics, they're going to think of the fake Gnostics, and and I'm even a member of a church that Ecclesiastica Gnostica Catholica, that claims to be the Gnostic, which is in fact the very opposite of that. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I studied Gnosticism. I came out of frankly, very fundamentalist Christianity. I was raised in that and rebelled against it insanely on a number of levels, and then got drawn back into that cult 3 times in my life. So I'm pretty fluid in the studies of the scriptures and an understanding of the history they presented to us. And I also did my entry into radio in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and onto the internet was actually Christian radio, which I did until 2011.
Are you a Christian?
No, not now.
Me neither. Okay, I was
No.
just wondering.
But what I did was I mounted an apologetic that made the case that it wasn't sustainable while being inside of the cult itself. In other words, I was sort of a believer who was just going, I can't, I need more proof. It's like, you want me to take this on faith? No. And after a while, you eventually deprogram. And I deprogrammed live on the air for 7 years. And one day I just said, can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Sorry, sports fans.
Uh-huh.
It's a fun ride.
You know, you have the Nag Hammadi, codices or texts, and then you have the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what a lot of people don't realize is they consider these the Gnostics, but these are two groups that were fundamentally opposed to one another. They were basically at war with one another. It's just that they had the same cosmology, and they were using this, Coptic, language. They had the same language that not that they spoke, but that they wrote in. And so people think it's all one big happy family when there's two groups that were at war with one another. And it's fascinating that they have this concept of these archons that come in two forms, and one is like a neonatal, kind of like little shriveled up fetus thing with gray skin and big eyes, and the other one is like a lizard that walks upright like a man, And, so
archetypes of the ET, basically. We're now dealing with archetypes and how that's kind of threaded into us. They do that with your gods. Your gods come in all different sizes, and they all tend to want the same things. They want worship, obedience, and usually blood in some form. And that was the problem. The problem at the end came down to this. I read that Bible in my life probably 20 times. My grandmother read it to me on her knee when I was a little kid. My mama used to read it. I read it. And I read it and going back and studying like the root Hebrew, the root Greek, the root Aramaic, doing extensive word studies on it. In the end, I came to one conclusion. This is a bloody religion. We wage wars for this shit.
Absolutely, yeah. And I read the Bible myself. A lot of people say they read the Bible, and I'm sure that you did. A lot of people, they said they read the Bible, and I'm not, so sure. But I can tell you that I read the Bible one time, 5 times in a row, from cover to cover, while I was in solitary confinement for 11 months in a 6x8, by myself.
Oh, wow.
And that's the type of whatever trauma-based mind control in itself, right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Where do they put Bibles? In hotel rooms and jail cells, wherever people are alone and desperate.
Exactly. And getting back to these perceived entities or space creatures or whatever they are, I try to, once I decided to have my show out, that there's such a wide spectrum of all these different things we look at. I decided, I want to focus on several different things, like the elongated skulls in Peru. I went down there and looked at them, and of course did the ayahuasca ritual while I was down there, and several other things. But one thing is what the Ghost Light Road phenomenon of East Texas, which is these plasma balls, these glowing orbs, which are known the world around. And it just so happens this one in Texas is the most prevalent, most reliable one, maybe in the whole world. They had the University of Tokyo came down and studied them back in the late 1980s. But I have done now 5 investigations of these things, and they know that I'm there. Somehow there's some type of they able to throw up a wall of fear or something like this. But I'm the first person that I know, and because I started filming them at first with rented professional video gear, and I am the only person that I know that or have even ever heard of who's not just filmed these things in 1080p, but actually filmed and documented with video the entities within the orbs. And I have this on video. I have the stills of it, and it blew my fucking mind when I saw that they are a type. They have the big heads with like the wraparound sunglasses, and basically very close to the image we've been given our entire lives of these ETs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what. There was actually another type of creature in there that you sometimes hear called pyramid head or whatever. Its head is like a triangle, and these are pictures that I took. This is an experience that I had, and I have the video, the photography evidence of it. It's fucking mind blowing. It's in my mind, it's some of the best quote unquote UFO footage, maybe ever taken.
I totally qualify that as UFO. I mean, or what? Unidentified entities. I mean,
yes, and let me tell you, I don't know where they come from ultimately, but I also have on tape, and I can show it to people. You'd have to take my word for it because the difference in the amount of light that they produce light, and the background, which is so black. But I'm telling you, I have filmed where they come from, or at least one of the places they come from, and it's from under the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're in their field, what do you feel something? Do you sense something? Do you have a sense of presence, of consciousness, of intelligence?
And I hate to admit this because I've been told by some of my psychics and stuff like that I won't be harmed and everything like this, and I don't know that they're good for me or bad for me. But and this may be just because of my nature that I feel this, and they're just playing on that. But there's this idea of a wall of fear. But I feel like fear is what I feel.
Okay.
But fear's been something has been a big issue with me my entire life, and the main fear that I had in my life, which is fear of violence with men, is something I had to work an entire lifetime to overcome.
Yeah.
And I did overcome that almost completely, only to learn that there's a whole nother world of fears out there. Many other fears.
Yeah. Yeah. The terrors, what sits beyond us. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we do when we deprogram is to deal with that because we've all been traumatically programmed, and many of us have been programmed with extreme violence, sexual violence, psychic violence, and so there's a whole programming system that goes into place there that basically brings that visceral energy up, and we respond to it chemically. It's a very real thing.
Absolutely, and I don't know whether it was for good or for bad, but I actually put myself in these situations in an attempt to become tough or whatever, what I wanted to see myself as, or whatever, and then ultimately in my experiences in prison and stuff like this, with extreme violence, and becoming accustomed to extreme violence and the threat of extreme violence.
Yeah, it's really real in prison. I mean, I've never been in prison, but I have been in prison. I've been in prison not as a prisoner, but I've gone through there in another capacity, and I can tell you that what you sense in places like that is it's a sadness. It's an isolation. It's a sense of despair sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely despair.
Yeah, and I was in Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary maybe about 20 years ago on a business trip. Basically outreach to prisoners, and I remember talking to them and just, gosh, they were some of the nicest people I ever met, and they were also, I sensed their fear, I sensed their loneliness, their isolation. And I have a whole spiel on the prison system and why that's wrong on so many levels. I mean, I could go days on that shit, but there's very few crimes in this world that require the type of penal system we have. And the people who are running it are actually the people that should be inside of it anyway.
Yeah, animals.
Animals, yeah. So what else?
Man, I tell you what, we've covered a lot here, but these
Yeah.
so these jobs, they did this work on you. You know, they had an investment on you, in you, and so the jobs that you may or may not remember, I get a sense that you're telling me a lot of these were done more in a psychic or an interdimensional capacity than a boots on the ground type of deal.
Maybe not boots. In some cases, maybe sandals. There's many types of missions, and there's many ways in which people were used. And many of the people that went through programs were trained to do very specific things, some of which were actually quite mundane, but still important and required that level of compartmentalization. People who were what you would call mules or messengers. There were people who were decoys, or what you would call concubines, prostitutes. Intelligence operations require a lot of different skills, most of which is not extroverted military, hand-to-hand combat, weapons. It's mundane shit. It's stuff that requires a certain level of compartmentalization to do a specific thing. A courier may be dispatched to a location to deliver sensitive papers, documents, banknotes. It's very interesting how things are transacted, and the necessity to interact with people on a certain level and be very adaptive to that and be able to accomplish certain things in a time window, to be able to get in and out of certain places undetected. In some ways is a skill that's as necessary as a super soldier. So I have memories of being places and simply being able to be stealth, of being able to slip in and out, sometimes with equipment that was required to photograph a location or to assess a location.
Were you in the body, or were you there remote viewing?
I have at least one I remember in the body, and a number that I would say were probably astral, outside of the body.
But there's been more than one where you've been there actually where you got on a plane and went there physically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's strange gaps in memory, and there's strange memories. There's things I can't piece together. And one of the things that happened a few years ago is I quite accidentally stumbled upon somebody who was a handler, who had a place in my life at the time, who became a player in a certain situation that got notoriety and attention. And as a result of that, an independent researcher, unknown to me, actually outed this guy. And I was able to identify him and information about him independently.
You identified, were they your handler or were they somebody else's handler?
Yeah, mine.
Okay.
It was somebody who was inserted into my life.
Okay. So here's you want to ask where we go from here, or whatever a question I have. And we can, not knowing the things that we know, we can sometimes imagine these things. I'm not saying you. I'm talking about my situation here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a person that's been in my life. They're still in my life and everything like this. But there's a very a special person, and then there's also psychics. I have psychics now, and that's a whole separate question right there.
Yeah.
And there's. But there's been, I've had a psychic that I was having what her guides diagnosed as a Kundalini awakening. I woke up I was doing steroids at the time, and I was working out a couple years ago, and I woke up crying uncontrollably, literally crying uncontrollably. And it was that's the only time that's ever happened to me. And so but what it turned on to a situation where she gave me her number and had me call her, and this was in real time, and then she asked my permission for this and that and everything, and she asked my permission, and I thought it was just some new age stuff, and I was just kind of going along with it, and she moved what she calls energy in my body physically from over 1,000 miles away. And that made a profound impact on me because I was like, what is going on? You know, and still to this day, it's a very, but there's a type of a triangle of me and her and this other person. But this other person is somebody has every red flag conceivable. She's one of the most beautiful women in the world. She's a good friend of mine. She's a 26-year Hollywood veteran. She was at Julia Roberts' New Year's Eve party just a few months ago. You know what I mean? There's red flags out the wazoo. She also has a supernatural. She also has a superhuman sexuality. That's.
Yep.
She enters a room and it's like
intoxicating. You're literally overwhelmed by the sexual ambience.
Yes, she can have any man. There's no man that's not homosexual that can resist her. And so here's to me, and knowing what I have studying these things, you know, almost my entire life. And she also got some problems. She like altered personalities or something. She's can be very mean. And so it's got to be what I think it is, you know. But she kind of laughs off the idea, and she doesn't really. She's too far in it. They're not gonna. They can't let her go, you know.
Sorry, especially in Hollywood. I mean, in Hollywood, those people are assets for the system, and the system itself is a mind control system. The level of mind control and the number of people operating in Hollywood. I have some contacts in Hollywood, including somebody who was a former script developer and agent who has documented to me endless times some of these key people that are very, very clearly part of these projects who were planted there. Hollywood is a giant mind control operation from step one. I mean, long before Langley, Hollywood was running the scripts very early. And in fact, I think they mapped a lot of this stuff out there. The people that you meet in the industry, and this is true of the recording industry, the music industry, is that these people have been programmed and utilized in very wide-scale operations. And when you mention somebody like Julia Roberts, any high-end starlet, I mean, you know, it takes a good example, Britney Spears. I could go down a list of rock stars, and I've done this. I've analyzed their lyrics. I've analyzed their lives. Some of them are alive. Some of them are dead. And I can tell you that based on the best evidence, you glean from that they were all mind controlled, going back to before Elvis Presley, probably back to Buddy Holly.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and that's interesting you'd mentioned Buddy Holly because I was born and raised in Lubbock, Texas.
Oh, my.
Yeah. I mean, It's just, you know, the weird coincidence, I guess, you know.
Yeah, if you look at Buddy Holly, that was actually probably the beginning of when they got interested in rock and roll. You know, they knew this was coming. This was engineered. They created the teenager in order to have a new demographic group in the late 1940s, early 1950s. So they created a demographic. Then they began to market products and entertainment to them, and obviously rock and roll. Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock, movies like Asphalt Jungle.
West Side Story, maybe?
West Side Story, absolutely. Leonard Bernstein, yeah. They romanticized it there. They took Romeo and Juliet and put it into a modern opera format with very modern music. They gave us Elvis Presley. They gave us the Beatles, the largest scale mind control operation in entertainment history. And it just went from there. Because once they create an iconic brand, I mean, all of these people were brand names. It doesn't matter who they were. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, right up through the rap stars of today. They're assets. And they are expendable, by the way.
Very, very expendable. I've been listening to Josh Reeves, and I've also
yeah.
he's awesome. I give my thumbs up to him. I've also read a book. I can't remember the guy's name. It might be Constantine, but he wrote a book called The Covert War Against Rock.
Yeah,
and I absolutely do not believe that there has been one natural death of a rock star probably in the last 20 years. I mean, they're off all the time.
We just had a recent one with the shooting of the rapper Nipsey Hussle.
Okay,
outside of his clothing store.
What is that?
Well, my earliest blush at it was, first off, okay, Nipsey Hussle was 33 years old when he was gunned down. Okay, right there. Okay,
there you go, yeah.
One.
Oh, yeah.
He is an interesting character. I don't follow hip hop music that much, so I don't know much about his music, but he was apparently very interested in holistic health, and apparently was involved in producing a documentary on holistic doctors who have experienced, let's just say, untimely demises.
Oh no, I know all about that. That's
okay.
And
I know that even behind that
of the century,
there's always a story within a story within a story. It's the Russian nesting doll thing. So with Nipsey Hussle, I'm still drilling down. I've been posting on Facebook, and what I do is I put stuff out, and then my listeners and the people I communicate with, they go out and research it for me, and they come back with these nuggets. And sometimes they tell me, you know what, dude, you're just plain off on this. You're wrong. But sometimes I'm wrong for the right reason. But my nose tells me there's something there. Because every generation has seen iconic entertainers, performers taken from them. Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Biggie Smalls. We have seen in every generation a profound loss of talent. And in some cases, we've seen performers who were taken out and then people dropped into their place, such as Paul McCartney, which, that stuff came out when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It's been around. Sorry, I got a helicopter flying in here. Hi, guys.
Are you serious? You have
no, seriously, I got a helicopter.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
I'm sure it is, too. It happens all the time.
Yeah. And Chester Bennington, who died recently, and the guy from Soundgarden, Chris Cornell. Okay, they were working on a project to expose pedophilia, and Chris Cornell hung himself with the erotic asphyxiation, supposedly. Right. Same thing with the guy with the NXS.
Yep, Michael Hutchins.
Yeah. And his father Michael Hutchins' father went on a worldwide tour telling people that that's not what happened and everything. And, of course, Michael Hutchins was with the ex-wife of the guy who did The Wall. What's his name? Sir
Roger Waters.
Huh?
Roger Waters from Pink Floyd?
No. The guy who starred in the movie The Wall. Who's Sir... He was in the Boomtown Rats. He was in the Boomtown Rats.
Bob Geldof.
Bob Geldof. Sir Bob Geldof.
His daughter, Peaches Geldof, ultimately wound up having a very strange end, too.
Yeah, and Sir Bob, who got Michael Hutchins arrested with some opium because he and his then girlfriend went to a house that he partially owned and just came up with a bag of opium and gave it to the cops and said, it was Michael Hutchins, and Michael Hutchins went through a bunch of shit through that. But he told Michael Hutchins, don't mess around with my old lady and everything, and I think he married her or something like that, and he wound up, he asphyxiated himself supposedly with this belt, on this autoerotic asphyxiation. And
that's a common one they like that. They use that a lot. They did that with the actor David Carradine too.
They really did. They did that with either Chris Cornell or Chester Bennington.
Yeah.
But they were working on a book to expose pedophilia, as was the Anthony Bourdain.
Yes. Yeah.
who was also working, who was working on a second book to expose this thing, and he committed. All these people committed suicide. Just like
Cornell
Dr.
and
Bradstreet,
Bennington
the
were
holistic.
likely both project kids. I've been told by somebody who would have known that Kurt Cobain was in a program and that he was actually at one point at one of the projects. Oh gosh, my memory suddenly skidded off the rails here.
Ibis.
The place where they did the remote viewing. Anyway, there's anecdotal evidence that most of these rock stars have been part of projects, and that a lot of what they have done is they are assets that are deployed. Again, these are very super talented people. They are used to create a certain movement. They rebel. If everybody from Buddy Holly through Kurt Cobain, when they were taken out, this is true with Jimi Hendrix, Brian Jones, the Rolling Stones.
Jim Morrison.
Yeah, they were planning to make an exit from their controlled system.
Tom Petty.
Buddy Holly was actually in the process of setting up his own record company. He was going to break from producer Norman Petty, who was his handler. And all of a sudden, gosh, his plane just fell out of the sky.
Yeah.
We're talking the 1950s here.
Randy Rhoads was getting ready to quit Ozzy.
Yeah. The death toll is long on this. They don't care. They're expendable assets.
Yeah, they know they can create another one.
Yeah, and so it's a tragedy because a lot of these people left us with incredible work. I spent a lot of time analyzing the lyrics because I'm a lyricist. I'm a poet. I play guitar. I like music, and I can hear a resonance pattern in the music that tells me these people were fucked with.
Okay.
They wrote it in blood in their lyrics in a lot of cases.
They really what?
They wrote it in blood in their lyrics. When you start looking at the lyrics of some of these artists, if Kurt Cobain put it in his.
You mean he took his own blood and wrote the lyrics with
No, I mean blood in terms of their lyrics. That was literally their blood in the lyrics. They were exposing their souls there.
Okay, but are you saying that they took their blood and wrote it with a pen on paper with their blood?
Well, some of them literally did, yeah. Yeah. That was not unheard of. I meant it metaphorically. What I meant was their blood is in a lot of their music and in their lyrics.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Music is my first estate. Music is my marriage. I'm really primarily a musician, and one thing that I've realized about these pop stars and everything like this, the human being has so much potential that just being delivered from the 9 to 5 can allow you to take your art to such a different level. It's amazing. And I less than a month and a half ago, I wrote a hit. I've got a hit song.
Cool.
And so, knowing what I now know about you, that you're you're a musician and everything like this, I want to send it to you, off list, and just get your private,
that would be great. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I love music. When I get the chance, I will pull musicians into the conversations that I have because I think many of them have a valuable energetic to contribute to this.
Absolutely.
We're talking about so much dark stuff, but when you can channel this into music, when you can get it to a place where we transcend the conscious mind and we go into the emotion, into the heart, and we begin to open up, it's like, I still listen to Jimi Hendrix sometimes, which, that was probably one of the first pop stars I recognized as being a legitimate genius musically. And I listened to those literally Stratocaster stratospheric, and these solos that he's doing. And there's something there in that. He's hitting frequencies, his tones. To this day, I would kill to get the tones out of a guitar amp that Jimi Hendrix was able to pull out of his guitars. There was an artistry there, and any great art allows us to begin to move vibrationally above this human condition. It's what enables us to see, to be able to conceptualize beyond the literal. It's part of that whole lateral thinking thing.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Zakk Wylde. They've got so many guitar effects that are so great, and maybe even Zakk Wylde endorses some of them. But when it comes down to it, what he did was like with an overdrive box going into a Marshall. That's it. He doesn't need the effects. He just somehow does it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you can take a simple instrument in the hands of a master. You don't need much more. I've sat and listened to people just playing an acoustic guitar and heard them hit a harmonic on it that was just mind-bending. A voice that has the ability to hit those octaves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so in my own personal life, needing a roommate, because I lost one of my roommates was one of my psychics told me that he was spying on me. Anyway, but he's no longer here. But just out of coincidence, I've got a new roommate who is a virtuoso on the piano right as I'm needing someone to work with. So
nice.
It's very convenient.
Yeah. Universe will drop people into our wheelhouse when we need them. Yep, we'll do that. Sometimes it'll take them away, too.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll take the ones that are spying on you away, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's always a new handler right around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you're a useful asset, there'll be somebody out there.
Yeah.
They have interesting ways of dropping people into your lives.
They really do. And, that's in some sad way that keeping yourself useful to the machine or the matrix or whatever it is a survivability mechanism,
Yep. And eventually you do kind of age out of it. You become less useful to them over time. And then you go into what's called the slow kill program, where you begin to develop slow kill. And
that's
you
where
begin
you
to
slowly
develop.
become crazy or.
Yeah, they basically begin to retrograde you in some way. So that's why it's important. I saw your video where you were taking the salt bath. Can't stress enough the importance of doing shit like that, of detoxing, keeping our fields clean. You don't have to have been in a project to be assaulted by their system. I put this up on Twitter the other day, and what I said in my Twitter post was everything that was done to people in the projects were tests for what they were going to do to the populace at large. Thank you. And do you want to deprogram? The only way you get even is to get healthy and to stay sane and to stay vibrant. And they really would like to take a lot of us out. They would also like to debilitate most of the population so that they can control them. That's why they weaponize the medical system, and that's why we have to move out of the medical system and go into holistics. Just a simple thing like taking a salt bath, a simple thing like doing breathing, meditation, energy. These are all important components of staying well, and it's the way you get back at them.
It really is. I've got a water pitcher. I'm going to go over here and grab it for you. I want to show it to you right quick. The name of this water pitcher escapes me right now, but I got it through an infomercial. But the idea is that the water that we've all been drinking is dead in that it oxidizes you. But this water pitcher has a standard stuff in the filter, like different types of charcoal or whatever. But it also has tourmaline, which is something you see in your rock shops, like rocks and gems. And a brilliant scientist from Canada discovered it. But if you use an ORP meter, which is a standard, it's a type of device that they use in physics, that any type of water, no matter where you get it, whatever bottle it's from, or however good they say it is, the ORP meter will give it a positive 100 or 200 reading, meaning that it is oxidizing. That water is oxidizing you, and it's causing oxidization, cellular damage. Now, we've got another name for that, and we call it aging. Yeah. But this water right here gives a negative 100 to a negative 200 reading, meaning it is doing the exact opposite, according to the claims of this, infomercial that prompted me to buy this. But the answer could be water, as simple as water.
Well, we know from the experiments that Dr. Emoto did that even just talking to your water, blessing it, imparting positive energy, there's truths, and I've gone back when I read the scriptures, and the man they call Jesus, I call Issa, said that you could drink deadly poisons and not be taken down by them. We have the ability to transmute. And that's something they really don't want out there. But transmutation begins with some very simple things of using crystals, using natural elements, using energy, using spiritual energy.
Or just blessing what you're about to eat.
Just filter your water. I structure my water. I have a little water structuring unit, and I try as much as possible. I carry my own water with me, and I don't drink tap water to not take in their fluoridated, heavy metalled, chlorinated water that they're selling to us now. I mean, water used to be free, and now, you have to go through Nestle to get it. So, we live in a toxic world, but we can transmute. We can get past this. We can prevail. We can actually prosper.
I absolutely agree, and I get a sense that we're coming to the conclusion of our interview. And let me push the button on this camera here. Okay, purple. Okay, forget that. Anyway, Randy, let me tell you, it's been a joy and a pleasure speaking with you.
I've enjoyed this a lot. Thanks. This is great. What I would like to do is I'd like to flip the tables and get you on to talk about your book, whatever your story, and to talk about the elongated skulls.
You bet. You bet. I've got a lot to say about the elongated skulls. I've got some of my own personal observations that we haven't heard anywhere else out there, and I'd love to share those with you.
Yeah, I'd really like to hear that, because it kind of triangulated into some other things I was reading and studying. It was kind of bumped up against it, and so when I started bumping up against the subject, that's the universe saying, go there. So let's do this.
Well, let's get with one another off list and set up that appointment.
I will. Absolutely.
Randy, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. It was good to meet you. I feel like you're a brother, and I think we'll talk again real soon.
Thank you.
All right, my friend.
All right, man. Good night.
Good night.